Hello and welcome to the Flying Gato YouTube channel. My name is Elias, and in today's video we're going to be going over my 6-month review of my Honda Civic Type R. Now I share daily driver duties with this and the C6Z06 that I've done a ton of videos on lately, but I think today is the long overdue 6-month review. I have a lot to share with you guys. My first impressions, the good, the bad, and the very ugly. Be sure to stay tuned to the end for the very ugly stuff. We got to discuss some of the things that really need to be modified in this car if you're going to be doing daily driver duties. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about first impressions, my first 6 months. What did I feel about it? Honestly, the one phrase that comes to mind is, this might be the last ever new car I ever buy. Now we all know car enthusiasts go through cars a lot, but this is one of the very few times in my life that I'm like, you know what? I don't really need anything else. It pretty much has everything I want. It's got great looks on the exterior. I love the way that this thing was designed. I gotta be honest, I actually preferred the FK8, the way it looked before I bought the FL5. And even when I first got it, I'm just like, you know, it looks good, but there's something about it that maybe could use improvement. But after owning it and driving it and seeing it almost every day, I gotta say it's not only grown on me, I think it's one of the best designed cars out there from the exterior. And it looks different enough from the regular Civic hatchback that it sets it apart. You know, it's got the wider fenders. It's got, and the wide fenders are built in, unlike the FK8. It's got the little bit more subdued wing in the back. You know, it's black, so it kind of blends in. And when I drive it around town, I'm not really calling attention to myself. I live in a very rural area, and pretty much everybody drives really beat up old trucks, literal work trucks, or their company vehicle, which is usually a giant, you know, there are a bunch of linemen live here, giant, you know, work trucks. And so driving around a bona fide sports car, it's not something you want to necessarily do too much. You'll stand out like a sore thumb, and I don't know, as I get older, I don't want to really stand out that much. So I really love the subdued looks of this. The performance is amazing. I'm driving down this highway right here. This is a 2-lane road, and it's very comfortable. All I got to do though, if I want to do a little bit of pooning around, is drop it a few gears and feel that 300 horsepower. This is fast. This is very fast. This is not a slow car at all. And you know, I may be spoiled with power. I have a Camaro ZL11LE with 650 horsepower. I have a C6Z06 with 505 horsepower. But this thing with only 315-ish horsepower feels about as good as those cars do. There's kind of a limit as to how much horsepower you can really use on day-to-day roads like these. I mean, these rural roads are very dusty and kind of nasty. Traction is always going to be a problem on these roads. And so this car, with the power that it has, very impressive. I really wouldn't necessarily put more power into this thing. We'll see what kind of mods I get up to, but honestly, for daily use, I love the performance. And then finally, the comforts. One of the first things that I thought about when I drove this car down from New York to Florida, I'm like, you know, this car is like almost like a luxury car to me. And I own a 2011 BMW 335D. BMW. I've owned that for a long time. That actually was sold as a compact luxury vehicle back in 2011. And so I have a little bit of experience with luxury. And driving this car makes me feel like I'm driving a luxurious car. Now, I know it's only a Civic, and effectively it's not that much more modified than a regular Civic interior. But the little touches that it did, you know, the leather-wrapped steering wheel, the dash, the way it's laid out, it feels like an S2000 dashboard. The seats, these seats are incredible. It makes it feel special every time you get in and out. It holds you in, and you could drive for hours on this and be very comfortable. I'm really impressed. I was really impressed. My first 6 months have really been a great experience. Let's move on to the good. And there's so much to talk about on the good. There's so much good in this car. The first thing is the track days. I've done 8 track days, 7 or 8, I think 8 track days on this car, completely stock. The only thing I did have to change, and if you guys have been following along, you've known this, but I had to change the brake fluid and the brake pads. And I've obviously changed the oil since I've gotten new, obviously. And it's been great. I haven't really had any issues. I did have some vapor lock issues with the fueling system. I'll be talking about that in a different video, but that was really my fault, not the fault of the car. Other than that, this car's been flawless. It's some super fun on the track. It's very fast, very stable, a little bit bouncy, but honestly, as a track day car for even a newbie or advanced drivers, the Civic Type R is one of the best buys out there. It's really difficult to recommend other cars besides the Civic Type R, maybe the ZL1 1LE, definitely the SS1LE, the Miata. It definitely is part of that top 3 or 4 cars. If you want to have an everyday car that you can use on the track, this thing has it all. Of having a car like this is that not only is it great on track, but you can use it on the most mundane tasks that you can think of, going grocery shopping, driving down and doing some errands, like buying insurance, for example. And I'm going to call this the local commute is awesome in a car like this. First of all, having the manual transmission is something that honestly I don't think I could ever do without it anymore. And I know I bought the ZL1 1LE with automatic. I don't regret that at all because that's primarily a track car. But having a manual for local commutes just makes it special every time you go out. You have something to do, you have something to grab onto and shift, and you're part of the mechanical function of your car. And even with traffic, a little bit of traffic here and there. Again, I'm in the middle of nowhere, North Florida, so you know, when I talk about traffic, it's most likely not what you think when there's traffic. A little pull here. Second gear pull. Yes. Oh yes. But yeah, driving it around because it's manual, it just makes you feel engaged. And you could be having kind of a shitty day, or you're you know, sometimes not everybody has a great day, and I could be not feeling happy or not feeling the greatest I could ever be. I get in there, start driving it, shifting the manual, do a little second gear pull. How can I complain? How can I not smile after that? And that's really a big part of the experience of this thing, being able to shift my own gears. It's getting rarer and rarer these days to find manual shifted cars. I'm so glad that Honda insisted that all the Type Rs only come in a manual stick shift. Outside of those second gear pulls and being a manual, these local roads, I live in a very rural area, and yes, while it is Florida, we still have some nice corners and curves here. This car is excellent at taking those corners, those curves. I always feel so planted, and the tight steering feel, you know, is very responsive. The steering rack is extremely responsive. It's not something that I regret, right? It's you drive certain cars, you know, I drive my wife's old X5, for example. It's not a bad car, it's not a bad SUV. It feels great for an SUV. But getting in this car makes you realize how great this thing is at corners. And again, it just goes to show you that a little bit of fun, a little bit of excitement goes a long way to make your day better. Now, a big part of the paradox that makes this car so great is that usually when you're really good at short local commutes and track and local roads, you're usually not very good, the car's not very good, at long highway commutes. This car is actually great at both. And the key reason, I think, in my opinion, is the fact that this has lane keep assist. I'll explain why. Let me explain why. So, for example, in my Honda S2000 does an excellent job at local commuting, local trips. I love revving out that S2000 engine, getting it all the way up to 9,000 RPMs. It's an amazing vehicle to just have a ton of fun in. But when it gets to the highway, put it in sixth gear, yeah, part of it is my fault. I do have a loud exhaust on there because I love to hear the engine. But it just gets really, really boring and kind of noisy and darty and very annoying to drive long distances in the S2000. On the highway, you can definitely do it, but it's not going to be comfortable. The Civic Type R, however, makes it a very comfortable place. I've already talked about how great the interior is, how comfortable the interior is, the seats, and first impressions, it feels like you're driving a luxury car. Honestly, this thing is amazing on the interior. But the real big difference between an S2000 and the Civic Type R, besides the interior, is the fact that lane keep assist allows the car to keep its very, I would say, darty steering ratio, right? While not being annoying on the highway. If you drive an S2000 on the highway, you're always kind of minutely adjusting your place in the lane because the steering rack is extremely responsive, which is great, but in the highway, you want it to be a little bit less responsive. Lane keep assist though, man, it's a game changer. Not only that, like I said, everything else is pretty great. The stereo is pretty great. The air conditioning is okay. Everything is basically where you need it to be. So let's move on and talk about the bad. Since we're talking about highway commutes, there's two things that bother me about it. It's got great gas mileage, but it's got a small gas tank. We'll get to the gas tank in a little bit. That's the ugly part. The bad part is there's road noise, right? That's something I kind of expected coming into this thing. And again, I drive sports cars a lot. I have my aforementioned S2000, my Corvette, the Camaro, everything. All of those cars have tons of road noise. A big reason for that is that they all use very large, wide tires that are very sticky, and they're gonna give you a ton of noise. And I'm okay with that. But a lot of people would not like the fact that this car is very loud on the highway. There's a reason why it's called the Civic Type R. They lowered the weight. They don't put a lot of sound dampening into it. There's some people on some forums that are trying to reduce the interior noise of the car. I get it, but it's not really designed for that. This car only weighs 3,200 pounds. You start adding those sound dampening and sound deadening stuff, you're gonna add, 50, 60 pounds. I don't recommend it. I don't know, maybe it's just me. It kind of takes away from the character of the car. However, it is a bad part about owning a Civic Type R, especially if you're going to be doing long distance road trips. So as we drive along here, and again, this is kind of part of a long distance driving type thing, but I don't know if you guys notice in the camera, it kind of goes in and out of exposure, so I get washed out sometimes. A big reason for that is because this car is like a fishbowl. And that's what makes hot hatchbacks great. You have great visibility to the outside. This car is no exception. It's got great big windows, especially for today's cars. It's got great big windows, lots of great visibility. Love that about this car. But the big negative is that the HVAC system needs to work a little bit harder to keep the cabin temperature down. And I gotta admit, this HVAC system is very weak. This is probably the weakest HVAC system that I've seen on Hondas, and it's very similar to the one that the Civic Type R had, the FK8 had, and it could use a big help. Now, when I lived in Pennsylvania, it wasn't a big deal. Most days they weren't that hot. However, being here in Florida, it's pretty much always hot. Now, I live in North Florida, it doesn't get that bad in the summer, and it really cools down in the winter, which is great. But still, you're gonna notice a very weak HVAC system, and they changed it right around 2016. They really, because of the environmental stuff that's going on, they had to change the way their compressors and everything works. And so they changed it up, and they've actually had a recall on a lot of them. It hasn't been a great system for Honda. And I think they've improved it a little bit, but it's still very, very weak. It kind of sucks. So keep that in mind. If you buy a Civic Type R, you're gonna wanna tint the windows. That's gonna help a lot. The HVAC system is gonna thank you because it doesn't have to work as hard as it needs to if you don't get the windows tinted. Another bad part about owning this car, something that I wish Honda didn't force us with, and again, it's probably to do with environmental regulations again, and it has to do with the exhaust system. The exhaust system on this car, you don't hear it. All you hear is that tick, tick, tick sound of the engine. And honestly, like when I'm in a city or something, especially when it's a beautiful day out, I like to take the windows down, really hear and experience the tone of the engine through the exhaust system and enjoy the way it sounds. Maybe feel a little bit of a rumble as you drive down the city streets. a nice thing, you know, it's a really nice thing, especially on a nice day out. I used to do that in my Prelude a lot. Now, the next one is something, again, I was expecting, but it's something that you should know. And the fact is, while these seats are amazing to sit in and really comfortable, and I would never change them unless I'm getting some kind of racing bucket seats if I'm making a race car or something, it's getting in and out of these seats is not the best. Before we go into the ugly part of the video, I figure I want to show you guys what customizations I've done to the dashboard of the car, because there's a lot of things you can change this to. We're going to start out with the mode that I already use. This is individual mode. But in order to change that, all you got to do is come down here, hit this button, and you see that things change. This is sport mode. Some nice graphics show up. And this is comfort mode. Again, some nice graphics show up. Let's get right into the ugly now. And a big reason why I don't use my integrated infotainment system, as good as it is, this thing is amazing. I love how it is. Big reason I don't use it is because Honda, GM, and a few other companies were caught selling customer data to insurance companies, to LexisNexis, and other basically data gatherers. And honestly, I've had enough with these companies, Apple, Google. All they do is data mine what you do, your interest, your hobbies, to get you ads. And I think it's too much from Google and Apple, but I don't need my car manufacturer doing it as well. That's kind of crazy to me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, how shitty that it is that Honda does that. And until I really see something change, I'm not gonna use my infotainment system anymore, outside of, putting on the radio and the very, very good log R mode that it has. And let me show you guys that real quick. So if you go to this right here, this is log R mode, and shows you the gauges, and it does the data log. It's pretty nice, but that's all I'll ever use. I'm not going to use the infotainment system. That's pretty ugly, and again, I hope Honda fixes that so I can use it again. In the meantime though, look at what I'm using instead. So I mounted this to my car, and it works pretty dang well. So one of the most annoying parts about going long distance in this car is the fact that it has a tiny thimble of a gas tank. You're going along, you're doing a great speed, you're doing great time, and every 250 to 300 miles you have to stop. No matter how good you are with that gas pedal, you're never going to get above 300. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, you probably can hypermile it. Maybe I'll do that one day, but honestly, having a 10 or 11 gallon gas tank, it's unacceptable in a car with 300 horsepower. I understand this is the same gas tank that they use in the Civic hatchbacks and the normal Civics that don't have turbocharged engines, and they get to 35, 40 miles to the gallon easy, which gives them even more range. But in the Civic Type R, that's terrible. Let me show you guys. I've been doing a lot of spirited driving recently, and so I'm only getting 24.5 miles to the gallon. I only have 136 miles on this tank. You guys can see that right down there. And I only have 90 miles left before I have to fill up. There it is. That's kind of nuts. It's because it's got a tiny tank. I'd rather have a much bigger tank and not have to stop so much. But there it is. I don't know how to fix that. Honda should really think about fixing that at some point and give us an option for a bigger gas tank, or at least in the future upgrade the gas tank on these Type Rs. I don't know if I might even just drill a hole in the hatch and install a fuel cell above the existing gas tank, and I'll just fill up from the hatch. I'll open up the hatch and I'll fill it up. I don't know if that's what I'm gonna do one day, but this is unacceptable. Now, for the last one, for the ugliest part about the ownership of this car, we have to go outside. So let's get out here. It's a beautiful day today. One slight negative is the wheel is still a little bit large. I wish they were 18-inch. We can fix that. And some of the bulbs they use is incandescent, not a big deal. But I'm not out here to show you that. I'm out here to show you this. If you can see, there's a ton of rock chips on this car. This is a brand new car. In fact, I've only driven it about 4,000 miles. And the fact that it has that many rock chips It's extremely concerning to me. The paint is basically made, I don't know, out of paper. I want to show you guys, I think a cat or an animal got on top of the car. This paint is just so weak. It's insane. And that really is the worst part about owning the Civic Type R, and that's really why it's got such low miles. For me owning it for 6 months, I love driving my cars around, but after washing it, I think you guys saw the video, after I washed it, I was getting, excited to show you guys the details that I love about the exterior. I saw that it was just full of a bunch of rock chips, and I expect a couple of rock chips here and there, maybe over the 5-10 year period. It'll have 5, 6, 7 rock chips. That's okay. But to have I think there's 6 or 7 rock chips now. I think it only had 2,000 miles. It had 1 track day. To me, it's unacceptable. And it's come to a point where maybe manufacturers, because of the EPA or environmentalism or whatever, I guess their paint sucks. I think they're going to have to start putting full paint protection film on the front of all their cars. This car actually has paint protection film on the rear doors, where it widens out, and that's because they know rocks are going to hit that. But obviously rocks are going to hit the front of the car, and when they do, the paint just falls off. And so I don't know, maybe that's the solution. Maybe from the factory you should probably get paint protection film from all of these car manufacturers if your car is a special car. And I think the Civic Type R is a very special car. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If it's not, I'd love to argue with you. So even with all of that negativity out of the way, in conclusion, this car has convinced me that it's a better version of the Porsche 911 GT3. A better version. I know a lot of haters are going to be in my comments like, oh, this doesn't stack up at all. It's a hatchback. It's like, again, hear me out. It's got all the technology you could ever want. Lane keep assist, all that crazy good stuff. So if you want that, it's got it. It's got Apple CarPlay if you're going to use it. If you don't care about the data breach, it's not really a breach. If you don't care about the sharing of your data, you can use that in Android Auto as well. It's got great seats, very, very comfortable special bucket seats that are great at the track and great for driving around in. It's got a fully digital display for, not just your gauge cluster, but also a very nice infotainment display that's right in front of you. I think it works great. The manual transmission, it's one of the best in the business. It ranks right up there with those Porsche manual transmissions, so you're not missing out there at all. It's got great power, over 300 horsepower. It does compete with those Porsches, let me tell you. And on the track, it does great. Great times on the track. It is front-wheel drive. Some people may not like the way front-wheel drives drive, but I've actually discovered, and I've talked about this, I've discovered that I'm actually a front-wheel drive guy. I like the way front-wheel drive feels when you lose grip. Your rear end starts going out, you give it more throttle. I like that. I actually prefer front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive on the racetrack. I know people are going to tell me I'm crazy, I'm stupid. It is what it is. And so, honestly, I used to think maybe one day I'll buy a Porsche 911 GT3. Maybe that'll be like a good, midlife crisis car, let's say, or something like that. But honestly, I think the Type R, I think it's better. Because not only does it have all the things that we just discussed, but it also has very nice back seats. Sure, the regular 911, let's say if you get a Carrera 4S or a Carrera S, you can maybe fit small children in the back. A GT3, until literally this year, the newest GT3, they don't come with back seats. So you're not going to be able to put anybody back there. Storage space. This is a hatchback. I've taken this to Lowe's, Home Depot. I've used it to haul building materials around. Try to do that with your Porsche 911. You may be able to get a couple of things in there, but this hatchback competes with SUVs. That's how good this thing is. It's reliable. I don't have to worry about reliability. I can flog the engine to the end of time and it won't care. And I think Porsches are pretty reliable too, but maintenance, that's where they get you. Maintenance-wise, this is still a Honda. If I blow up the engine, it's $7 or $8 grand. Brand new from Honda. If I get a used one, hell, probably $3 or $4 grand. Who cares? That's what's great about having a Honda Civic Type R. Don't really have to worry about maintenance. Don't really have to worry about, hey, am I driving it too hard? Am I gonna pay out the nose because I'm driving too hard? What happens if I miss shift? What happens if this or that? I'm not that worried about it. And finally, obviously, the costs. A 911 GT3, I mean, you're going to spend at the minimum, you're going to spend 120 grand, 130 grand for a used one with a bunch of miles on it. If you're going to get a really nice example, you're looking at 150. If you're looking at a new one, you're over 200 grand. That's an insane amount of money for a car. So I'll leave it there, guys. I look forward to doing the modifications that I'm going to do to this car. I'm going to change the exterior light bulb. I'm going to get some LEDs going in there. I'm going to get obviously I'm going to get this thing tinted. I'm going to probably get an intake. I'll do an exhaust. You know, the normal stuff you should do if you have a Type R, to just get that little bit there that we couldn't do in the factory for whatever reason. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a long one, and if you guys have watched this to the end here, I really do appreciate every single one of you that did. If you don't mind, please hit that like button. It really helps me out. It lets me know that I'm doing the right thing for these videos. And subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.